This show is proudly sponsored by Habitats at Home, Australia's leading PVC enclosure specialist. Check them out on Instagram and Facebook at Habitats at Home, and be sure to visit habitatsathome.com.au if you're in the market for PVC reptile enclosures and other reptile supplies. Massive thanks to Tyson over at Habitats at Home. If you're in the market for your first snake, or you're looking to add to your collection, check out Stone Deaf Reptiles for high quality carpet pythons and other reptiles. Phil is a good friend of the show and has some of the best jungle pythons in Australia. Find him on Instagram at stonedeaf_reptiles and online at stonedeafreptiles.com. G'day and welcome to Under the Heat Lamp with Joe Mack. Today is episode number 17 and I've got with me Mr. Joe Ball. How are you, Joe?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, great. Yeah, really well. We're getting a bit carried away chatting beforehand there, so we figured we better press the start button and get the show on the road.
Yeah, let's get some action going. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I reckon. Righto. So for anyone who might not know, can you give us a bit of a background about yourself and tell us about your journey with reptiles up until now?
Well, you've probably guessed already if you haven't heard me talk before. I'm a Pom. I'm of English descent. I moved to Australia in 2001, so close on 25 years.
Wow.
I've always been into, as most of us reptile nuts are, always been into animals of that persuasion, if you like. As a kid, I always had little turtles in tanks and anything I could catch out of the paddocks on my old man's farm, and then sort of stepped up into frogs and toads and then some exotic stuff like terrapins and iguanas and things like that, just sort of kicking around as a kid with those kind of things. And then moved over to Australia, and then sort of in my early 30s decided that I was going to get into reptiles in a serious way because I'd got the weather for it and could do some things in the backyard that obviously I've never been able to do before in England, so set up a few little outdoor pits, if you like, and put a couple of lizards in, and things just grew from there. So yeah.
That's a very modest way to start, and then to end up where you are now, it's probably been a bit of a progression.
Yeah, I mean, the first lizards I got in Australia were in fact blue tongues. So the fact that the journey that I've been on with lots of other species along the way, and always kept the blue tongue thing bubbling along in the background, for that to have gotten to where it's gotten is quite ironic, really. The simple blue tongue, yeah, it's kind of dominated my life since that point, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, it from my experience, that's certainly what you are known for as your blue tongues, and I guess my listenership, I think I've got quite a bit of non-reptile people listenership. So I guess for those people, why would you be known for your blue tongues?
Um, by and large, you would say I'd be known for the blue tongues by all the different colour morphs that I firstly got my hands on, and secondly developed and changed the colours and made combinations, and been lucky enough to discover my own mutations from wild type animals, and yeah, just basically grab the common backyard bluey and make it all different fluoro colours from oranges and yellows and high contrast pied animals and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, made the blue tongue cool, basically. Because when I got into reptiles, it was all about the carpet python and the albino carpets, and everybody was throwing big dollars around to get into that. And everybody was the first green pythons were on license in Australia, or the first number of green pythons anyway. That everybody wanted a green python or an albino Darwin carpet
Darwin,
python.
yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed in the background while all that was happening, that some different colour mutation blue tongues had been discovered. You've got the albino bluey and the black bluey down there at Snake Ranch. This would be down in sort of the late noughties, if you like, before it got to, sort of just before 2010. And
Yeah.
I thought I want to get my hands on those. They're cool. And everybody's perception of the bluey was that they're a dirty little sleepy lizard that sort of poops everywhere and hide all the time. And yeah, they just didn't really have much going for them. And I just
I,
thought,
I mean, I think they've got heaps going for them just based on those attributes you listed.
yeah, fantastic. But believe me, that was the common perception of those things at that point. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it wasn't something that everybody loved. And in fact, the lizard, and it still does to a degree, that filled that niche at that point was the bearded dragon. You know, like that was always the entry level lizard. It's the most famous entry level lizard globally. I think
Yeah,
it's
hands
yeah
down.
the most commonly kept still. But over the course of the last 15 years, certainly in Australia, and it's definitely happened overseas too, even if it hasn't quite overtaken it yet. In terms of its frequency in the hobby, it certainly has moved past it for color variations, and it
Oh, yeah.
and it destroys it in terms of ease of keeping and that kind of thing. So um, it's gone on quite a journey, and I'm happy to be able to put my hand up and say that I've pioneered a big chunk of that. So yeah,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. Having a crack with them. There are what seems to be an absurd amount of mutations every time I try to, every time I stumble upon a bluey on social media. I go, oh shit, I've never even heard of that. But I have had a look at your website, which is phenomenal, and you've got a really good breakdown of all the different morphs and how they sort of interact with each other as well.
so there's close to 10 different individual mutations now. So you've got two different forms of albino, a partial and a true albino in the T negative and T positive. You've got hypermelanism, which is your black blue tongue. You've got the opposite to an albino, which is an xanthic or anery, you might call it, that takes out the oranges and yellow pigment. You've got white northerns, which are close to a leucistic animal. Um, you've also got patternless. Um, and then more latterly, you've got what represents the pied mutation, and there's two or three different variations of that. So, whilst that seems a lot, that's nothing until you start actually combining the mutations. So you've got all those single genes, then we start putting them together, you make all these different combinations. So there's sort of 40 or between 40 and 50 different combination colours of blue tongues now as well. And um, along the way, that's sucked in a demographic of people from the age of sort of 10, 11, 12, up to even sort of pensioners that hit me up wanting blue tongues. So I've got mums buying them for the kids, and then I've got people in retirement buying blue tongues too. So um, they sort of have basically gone viral, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah,
um, what would you say is the most popular one? Like, what are the mutations that people are really looking for?
I'll grab a couple now. As I
Please,
said to you
yeah,
before, we're about a month short of baby season. But what I can do is I can show you a couple of really big, hefty, um, pregnant mamas.
yeah,
So,
yeah, for sure.
and this guy would have to represent the most common or the most popular, if you like. This is the hypermelanistic blue tongue here. Um, so the black bluey, and you can see this is a female, and she's huge. She'd have sort of a dozen babies jammed in there, and as you can see, she's jet black, other than the belly, which is sort of an orange patterning. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
her there.
it's quite incredible. I've bred blueies a few times now, and just the sheer amount of little live babies that they, eject when it comes time to give birth to them, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that's her there, and a good example of a combo, um, which sort of as is proven very popular too, is when you combine hypermelanism with albino. So don't mind my head just ducking off screen as I try and grab an animal. Um, and this came out to be a high orange animal. She's actually just in slough. Again, she's pregnant. There'd be another dozen babies in there. This girl too is quite famous too. She appears on the front cover of that book
Front of the
there.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. We'll touch on those in a bit, but
for sure. Yeah,
that's her in real life, and that's her as a pin-up girl on Danny Brown's Skink book. So
front
yeah,
page. So is that a
yeah,
larva? Is that what that
yeah.
is?
That's a larva. So that's a combination of albinism and hypermelanism, which
Hypermelanism.
gives you an albino look, but a high orange albino look too.
Yeah, and not only are they very beautiful, these color mutations, but blueies are just such like they're so laid back. They're always relaxed, and even if you get one that carries on and huffs and puffs and flicks its tongue out, at least in my experience with eastern blue tongues, as soon as you pick them up, they just stop, and then they
Yeah,
just
they're
hang out.
fine. Yeah, yeah, and that sort of drills back to the point of what makes them sort of suitable for all, um, and the perfect entry level reptiles. So yeah,
Yeah,
for
entirely.
sure.
And so if I was to get a baby bluey, let's say I've got an adult bluey, what would be your recommendations on a way to set up an adult bluey? What's the ideal enclosure and conditions to keep it in?
Well, it's a classic situation, really, for a bluey. I mean, they're a terrestrial species, which means they're happy on the ground. So you don't have to put in sort of lots of climbing perches and sort of elevated points for them. It's all about getting the substrate right, and sort of the basque area right. And you can do that in a 4 foot cage for an adult bluey, which again is a common size of cage, which you can pick up from most pet stores or on Gumtree and places like that. And you, once you've got that set up, you'd set sort of a bit of a substrate up, because a bluey is basically a swimmer, which a lot of skinks are. By that I mean they like to get down into mulch and sort of swim through that. So you could use um, anything from shredded paper to natural stuff like bark or sort of dried hay or anything like that. Leaves, anything like that. Whatever floats your boat, really, as long as it's not sort of got. As long as it's nice and clean, but it does need to have some depth so they can behave naturally and sort of get down in there. And then they need sort of a hide at one end that they can climb up onto, and sort of bask on top of that with a heat light above it, and then UV also, which it only needs to have a sort of moderate range, so sort of 5.0 for those that understand UV. You don't need the high range UV that you do for a monitor or a dragon, sort of
Yeah,
just medium range. So I might just sort of swing to an enclosure there, if you can
yeah,
see
absolutely. Yeah, sure.
that there. Okay, that that's sort of a basic setup. You've got. I'll open it up. You've got some deep bark there and a hide, and the lizard there under the hide. Can you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So fairly easy to set up. Um, yeah, and then in regard to feeding them, which again, this is what I think gives you a massive advantage over. Just get this camera right again. Sorry, gives you a
no
massive
stress.
advantage over bearded dragons and other lizards. Is that blue tongues? You can feed them from items that you just select off a supermarket shelf. So you can just go with a mixture of veggies and beef or turkey mince, or even uh, high quality dog and cat food, and you don't need to worry about using live insects or that kind of stuff. So you can do it very cheaply, you know.
Yeah,
As long
and
as you make a good mix and add a bit of calcium in there, put your veggies in there. You could even go as far as buying the um, dead dried insects and make a nice mix for them, you know. But it's stuff that you can have on hand frozen, and you don't have to keep uh, keep live insects and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. You know?
nothing worse than a rogue cricket inside a lizard enclosure that's fucking cheeping all night.
Or lots of rogue crickets, which is what you end up with after a while when you keep dragons and monitors, and you know, rogue crickets in the enclosure are one thing, but rogue cricket colonies throughout the house are another. For
Yeah.
people, you know, for us extreme reptile keepers, you know, that will invariably happen once you go down that path.
Yes,
So I
it's
can
a
keep
slippery slope.
I can keep a large quantity of blue tongues, and I can have all the food made up in one batch, keep it frozen, and then just get it out, defrost it, and feed it to them. You
And
know?
off you go. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
handy thing
yeah,
about them being more of a generalist omnivorous species. You've got a wide array of options there. You make it easy or as
yeah,
difficult for yourself as you want.
yeah, for sure.
Have you got any more sort of extreme visual blueies there next year?
Yeah,
Something.
yeah. I've got a few things we can have a look at here. Okay, so in regards to blue tongue mutations, this is where the plot thickens. And you have this mutation here, which is called a white side. I don't know if the camera's truly picking it up, but it's a white lizard with a stripe down its back there. This one is a fairly light example. And it kind of represents a pied look. Um, and this guy came onto the scene in 2020, and it's brought a total change and opened up the doors to heaps more combos. So again, this is a pregnant girl. I'll put her back for now. On top of that, I was working on another mutation which I deemed to be of similar ilk, which had some sort of more soft pied markings, and that's this guy here. And this is what's called a patchwork, and
Patchwork.
it has sort of more subtle pied markings on the snout, and on the toes and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's a patchwork. I've proven that out to be a recessive. Yeah, so that was basically a partial pied, if you like. And what I thought I'd do is put both of them together to see what that would do. And lo and behold, when I put them together, that came up with another pied animal again straight off the bat, which proved that the two were actually compatible. And you got a midpoint pied animal. So that in itself meant that you'd got three different layers to it straight off the bat, because both the white side and the patchwork mutation were essentially the same thing. Paired together, you made a midpoint animal. So whilst
Fascinating.
yeah, that's fascinating. And individually, some of those aren't that remarkable, so to speak. But once you then start to add other mutations with it, and as with all bluey combos, once you add hypermelanism to it, which is your black bluey, you then create something which is totally unique and sort of off the Richter scale, if you like, if mutation combinations float your boat. And I've got here what those outcomes were. So once you put the white side into hypermel, you get what I named a panda, which again, got that here. Now this, the camera will really pick up well and start to illustrate what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's
So
epic.
yeah,
That's
so
very
now
cool.
you've got something that is basically black and white contrast, and this guy rivals like the pied gators that you see in the US and some of the high contrast pied ball pythons and all that kind of stuff. And just creates a unique, if you like, I don't like the term, but a unique designer animal. And again, it just opens the eyes and opens the floodgates for heaps of new reptile enthusiasts to sort of get involved, because they see this and literally go, wow, You know,
Okay, jaws hit the floor.
pardon? Yeah,
Jaws hit the
jaws hit the
floor.
floor. And
Yeah.
as I just described, because you've got three different levels of pied, you then end up with a multitude of different levels of this. So it's not just one combo. You end up with, which I'm only partially down the road of. You you're going to end up with sort of, if you like, 20 different variations of that. And I'll show you the two that I've got to so far. So that one's called a panda, and this one is sort of um, what I would call a mask. So this has got a lot more black pigment on it and just pieces missing. So it's just more like the patchwork, but a hypermelanistic version of it. So can you see that there?
Yeah, yeah, that's great.
You know that, and so yeah, from the panda down to the mask, you've got all these different levels of black pigment on white, which sort of over the coming seasons you're going to be able to see, yeah, as many different variations of that as you like, basically. um
So,
and go on, sorry, Joe.
no, I was just going to say, so there's basically 10 different base mutations. So there's a stack of different, combinations that you can do there. And so I guess how many different sort of combinations are you looking are you working on now, I guess?
I mean, with combinations, you're always looking to make something that has a wow factor to it,
Yeah.
not just combinations for combination's sake. I mean, you can go right. You've got, say, an albino pied. Um, if that doesn't look cool or doesn't look anything different, then there's no point working on it. You're just making
Yeah.
it for the sake of making it. That's why I sort of focused on the hypermel, because that's where you're going to get your true sort of different looking animals, and like with your larvas and that kind of stuff. So there's combinations for combination's sake, and there's actual combinations that look good. As you can see there, you can see that contrast on the face of that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So there's good and bad combos out there, basically, and those that are good, you know immediately when you put a picture up on social media, and because only a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, I put a picture of these two together on my social media page. So that's panda and mask, and I got 4,500 likes, um, sort of in the space of 3 or 4 days, which on a page that generally for a bluey I get a couple of hundred hits on, you know. So that tells you immediately what everybody is into.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way to gauge and help you get a bit of an idea on, what direction you should or you could take with the things.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I guess so. If you were to put if that say that mask animal there was albino, I guess it potentially wouldn't look too dissimilar to like a lava bluey.
yeah, but basically, but a lot of that's still to come. You know, I've done a little bit. I did create one albino version last year, but it was very pale, and like I say, it didn't really offer anything that looked different to what's already out there. And with the lava being so high contrast orange white, it's debatable as to whether you'll beat that with a pie combination albino. You sort of already got this um, sort of parametrics albino, if you like, already on the shelf. So we'll see what
Yeah.
combos come out this year.
Michelle,
Mm.
is there any that you're particularly excited about or looking forward to that you'd be willing
Well,
to share?
well, that is the one that you touched on. You know, you saw that mask and you saw the panda. How good would that be if you could make that? You know, you could turn that black into a high contrast red or orange.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Um, so yeah, that question needs to be answered.
Yes, and I guess time will tell with that one. Um,
Yeah, and
just out
and
of
I've hope
curiosity,
go
yeah,
on,
I was just
and
going to
I've hope
ask. You're right. Go, go. You're the
I've
guest.
I've hopefully got the animals gravid to answer that question in the next couple of months. Yeah, so yeah.
Does the intensity in the color change much from when they are freshly born, like as they grow? Does it, or do they come out as vibrant as the adults?
Um, when compared to other reptiles, I think is the best way to answer that. Uh, Blue tongue mutations tend to hold fast, you know. So how they're born is generally how they'll look as they mature. Yes, some of them will fade off a little, and some appearances will strengthen a little. But by and large, when you compare that to, say, how a green tree python can look as a neonate versus how it looks at 5 or 6 years old, or how some of the carpet python mutations change, then blueies tend to hold their colour pretty well from birth to adulthood.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of
Yeah,
know what you're in for, I guess, once they're born. But
you
um,
you do generally, yeah, yeah.
you'd have to keep a pretty good track of obviously what pairings you're doing. There'd be some good note taking. Otherwise, I imagine you could end up stumbling upon a litter of blueies and going, oh shit, what did I pair here? What are those?
Yeah, and that's yeah, and the answer to that is yes. You know, I have every animal documented as to where its parentage is, the genetics and that kind of stuff. But some of them end up being possible for this, that, or the other, and that's hard to track sometimes because if a parent that you use to put to something else is possible for something, and you don't prove that out, then a trait can pop out a generation later.
Later on?
uh,
Yeah,
uh, um, so you do get a few things that sort of pop out and you go, yeah, that could well have been in there because it was related to that back then, and so on and so forth. But so yes, um, you know, you need some great record keeping, but it doesn't stop traits popping up um, unexpectedly later, which is a good thing.
yeah. Good thing. Yeah, definitely. You can get excited by a few things as they go.
Yeah, yeah, you can
Um,
have something pop out that you didn't realize was still in there, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask before is what sort of price range are some of these blueies sitting in?
Look, they've originally the first albino blueies and hypermels were sold by Snake Ranch for sort of around the 1,500 to 2 grand mark. And Uh, that's that's held to this day, really. You can hypermels will still fetch that sort of number, especially if they're het for other things. And the same with the albinos, which shows that the bluey game has just sort of continued rumbling on year after year after year. Um, but then some of the combos over the top of that, and some of the founder animals or the first run of certain things can get sort of uh, 3, 4, 5 times that value. So some of the first white side and pied animals get sort of upwards and closer to the 10K mark, you know.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
yeah.
Would you say you can sort of attribute that, that value holding to, what am I trying to say here? I guess, there are a great animal and I guess because they're bringing more people in, there's more of a demand for them. So that value holds because there's always going to be people looking for them. Because blue
E-
tongues they are relatively easy to breed and they often, they can produce pretty big litters. So it's not like they're, I guess, yeah, there should be plenty out there, but I guess people still want them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few layers to the answer to that question. First off, is that um, unlike a lot of species in Australia, you're allowed to keep them in every state. So basically, the entire of Australia is opened up to being able to keep blue tongues. You compare that to some of the other nicer coloured reptiles, some of your green pythons and emerald tree monitors and things like that. Your market is exponentially bigger. And then secondly, on top of that, a point which I touched on earlier, your demographic is much greater too. Mum will buy little Johnny a bluey when she won't buy him a snake. So you know a young lad or a young girl getting into the hobby can get a bluey, and then also pensioners and people in the latter years find them easier to keep too. So there's those two sides of it. Also, um, contrary to what you said, yes, blueies are easier to breed. Some of the wild types and so on, some of common eastern blue tongues will breed and produce quite a few. But bluey mutations are a little bit harder to breed. So, and in each combination, you're not going to be able to put visual over visual and get, say, a full litter of larvas. To
Yeah.
make a larva, you're often putting a pair of double hets together, or a double het to an albino het hyper, or to a larva. So you're only going to get um,
Yeah.
ratios such as a 1 in 16 for a larva, or a 1 in 8, or a 1 in 4, or something like that. Um, and then odd ones, and not necessarily viable, or so on and so forth. So, a good season, when you have sort of half a dozen larva pairings, you might be lucky to only make 3 or 4 larvas.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
in a given season, I look around and see what people produce. I don't see more than a dozen larvas produced in the whole hobby every year.
Wow.
Maybe a few more, sometimes a few less. Um, which means that the demand for that specific colour just retains. And same with albinos. It's always a het over an albino, so it ends up being half a litter, and yeah, so it's diluted somewhat. And once you start pairing some of those animals, they do become a little bit harder to breed, because mutations, by and large, are not, say, as breeding fit as a wild type.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great explanation. Thank you. That's something that I hadn't really considered either. That's awesome. Um, you you don't do just blueies. You've got a bit of a history with monitors and some pythons as well, I understand. Maybe some green monitors.
Look, along that journey that we touched on at the start, I'm like every other reptile obsessive person. I've sort of started with blueies, and then went on a harem scarum lap around sort of every Australian reptile that interested me, which is pretty much all of them.
All of them.
And I did the full journey with the carpet pythons. I bought those albino Darwins when they were ridiculously priced, and got sort of chewed up in making some of the combinations for those as well, pairing them with Jags and Zebs, and slap my wrist pairing them to bread lies, and making the high orange albino bread lies, which sort of um, um, look akin to the lava blue tongues, or that journey. Then the moon glows, pairing them to xanthics, the pure white
Yeah.
carpets, all that kind of stuff. So I then got lost in breeding lots of rodents to do all that. um and then and then getting obsessed with monitors again, and then the rodent colony having to grow bigger and bigger, because I got into breeding larger monitors, parentes and lace monitors, and all that kind of stuff. And then some of the um more finicky species, some of the smaller Kimberley monitors and rock monitors and that kind of stuff, and the emerald tree monitors, which you touched on with Aaron the other week, without getting too far into that. Um, Fortunate enough to have played around with those and bred a couple. Um, so yeah, there was all that. I mean, this is a sort of a 15-year journey, if you like. But then on top of that, whilst I do love all that stuff, and I don't like to sort of rank stuff at all, because my obsession for monitors and snakes has um, always been right up there. Um, to do some of the other skink species, sort of in line with the blueies, is sort of something that I've really focused on too.
Yeah.
And I've got a
What?
few. I've got a few of those to my side, which we'll have a look at.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, why not?
um, a couple of key things there. You've got the albino tree skink, which was first produced by Mick Mather down in New South Wales, who popped one of those out off a wild type pair. I was fortunate enough to work with those. I picked up that colony from Dave Mercier, and sort of did a bit with those. I'll grab a couple of those in a minute, because they're sort of over in a rack. But um, they're on top of that, there's albinism in the Cunningham skinks, which is something that's I'm fortunate enough to have just started to release this year, which I've got here. These were produced by, the first one was produced by Brett McKinley in New South Wales, and as you can see, these are a skink not for the faint-hearted. These are a sort of a very, very aggressive sort of bitey skink, if you like. And they'll give you a good bite. See, as it bite me. They say, yeah, very
Savage
aggressive.
little
Give them,
creatures.
yeah. I love these things because they're a colony lizard, and you can keep them outside in big rock piles, and so yeah, I was fortunate enough to get the founder animals of those and do some outbreeding, and now we're at the point where I've sort of made sort of 15 or 16 individuals of these now, and this
Wow.
is sort of a up and coming pair that are sort of 18 months old. So
Wow, they're solid.
yeah, and so that's those. I will just quickly nip and grab a couple of those albino tree skinks and
Yeah,
do a little
sure.
comparison of those on the screen.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see those at Dave's place. Jeez, they must be 6 or 7 years ago, maybe even longer now. They are awesome, those little dudes.
Um, Dave picked up the original group and then passed them on to me. And then I bred a load and gave Dave some back. So 6 or 7 years ago, you possibly saw some that I gave him back. But
Yeah,
the
right.
original group of these I got in 2010. So it's like 15 years ago
Wow.
since I sort of picked these up to start with. Um, and there's quite a few of these out in the hobby now. So that's the little guy there. I'll compare it to a Cunningham skink so that you can see sort of the difference. Be
Jeez,
careful not to.
that Cunningham's would eat that, that tree
Yeah,
skink.
it would. And look, I call these both albinos, which they are, but this is a good chance to explain what I was talking about when you talk about a true albino and a partial albino. That's a true albino. You see the red eyes there. So
Yep.
that's what they call a T negative albino. And this is what you call a caramel albino. And whilst on the camera, it probably doesn't, you can't see it. Those eyes are actually red. They're like a deep red wine. And that means it comes out sort of more of a caramel color as opposed to sort of a white pink color. So you can see the coloration difference there.
Yeah.
So that's
And that,
a,
what does
a
that
T
T stand
negative.
for? Is it Tyranase?
Yes, yeah, that's it. However you want to say it, I always slip up over that. Tyrosinase, or something like that. So you got your,
Tyrosinase? Yeah.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. So a T negative, I would call that that's a genuine albino. So you've got a bright red eye, and there's no melanin at all through that animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas that whilst all the black has gone, if you compare that to a normal Cunningham skink, a Cunningham skink is a jet black. There's not a single black pigment on that, but it comes out as sort of a caramel color. So there is still some washes of melanin still on that animal, and it sort of leaves it in that sort of color as you see. So
Do you
yeah,
see any variation in the Cunninghams, the caramel Cunninghams?
Yeah, there's a sort of a whiter version of those in the albinos, and then sort of a more caramel color. But I think to get some true variations, we're going to actually have to pair to some to some other different sort of softer colours of Cunninghams, some of the ones that have got the reds and oranges on the underbellies and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. So there's a whole body of work ahead for those to create the variation that you're talking about.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
that's still to come. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, geez, 15 years sounds like you jammed a lot into 15 years, and you probably got at least another 15 years ahead of you to get on top of all these projects.
Yeah, and it's flown by. Heaps of
Yeah,
projects in there, but um, I think, as I touched base with you before, about the reason I've been able to do that is I'm very lucky. I've got an enabling wife who is just as obsessed with animals as I am, and whenever we've got a spare quid, we can drop it on animals as opposed to more functional things that other people are sort of bound to, if you like.
yeah.
So
I prefer to be bound to animals.
yeah. So I've always been able just to jump on board stuff as soon as I've wanted to do it, and that's sort of enabled me, if you like, to uh, run these projects. Whilst on the topic of skinks, um, I wanted to finish with these little guys,
Finish the
and
show
this
and
is
tell.
yeah. We got a bit more to cover after that, but I just wanted to, we looked at tree skinks and Cunningham skinks. This is sort of a slow burner for me, and I think there's major potential in these guys in the hobby, which is totally untapped, and that's the pink tongue skink.
Oh, agree wholeheartedly.
And I've got a couple of these here. I've got a patternless here, which um, I produced earlier in the season. And what these guys are showing is some nice soft oranges, and I think that these sort of tick a few different boxes. For those guys that sort of love arboreal species and find blueies a bit boring, you've got this amazing prehensile long tail on these guys, and you can set them up in sort of arboreal cages, and they're nocturnal. They come out, they climb up branches, and sort of present themselves more readily than a bluey, and they sort of been kicking around in the hobby at around the $20 a piece lizard mark, and I think nobody really pays any interest in them, but as you can see, they're a fascinating little lizard. You've got this patternless here, and I've got this is sort of a more caramelly colour, which has got the more conventional banding. So that's what an adult looks like, you know. And you've got those long, fascinating long tails. So dare I say it, Hopper will probably shout me down, but these to me are the skink Varanus prasinus, and
Yeah, just
and
a little bit slower.
a little bit slower, but in many ways can fit the same space in the hobby, but have the ability to be kept by everyone in every state,
Yeah, yeah,
and
true.
if we can get these out there in cool paint jobs,
I was gonna say if
then
we could make them green.
yeah, that's right. If you can make them green or orange or whatever, I mean, you've got patternless already, and this is
Yeah,
showing some oranges. I
yeah,
know it's not there when compared to some of those blueies, but I just think if you could get this 2 minute video now and look at it in 5 years' time, um,
yeah.
I wonder where it's at.
Yeah, I will
Um,
say too that there's definitely a whole subset of people within their hobby that want to keep things bioactive, and those guys are the perfect candidate for a pretty small little rainforest bioactive setup. They don't trample things, they won't rip out plants. They're just going to cruise around and they're going to eat their crickets or their pinkies or their snails or whatever it is that you're giving them.
you just said that like 100 times better than what I was trying to get at the start of
Oh,
it by saying about arboreal um, um, cages and all that kind of stuff. Because I guess you're that kind of guy. You'd probably be into all that sort of bioactive, and I guess it fits kind of fits your demographic a little bit with that. You know, they're more fascinating species. You can do all that sort of cool hippie stuff with it if you like. You know, you buy.
Are
That's
you
how
trying
I
to
see
sell
it.
me?
You
Are
know.
you trying to sell me a pink tongue right now?
Yeah. That's it. But that's, you know, you just hit the nail on the head. You know, like
Yeah,
that to me, that's what that it fit. It's like the blue tongue for the
for the
hobby
hippies.
nerds. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
no, I agree. We have one at work at the aquarium, and it is awesome. Like, obviously, you know, they're primarily nocturnal, so it's not out very much. But when it is out, we're like, yeah, look at him, check him out, he's awesome.
Yeah.
They
They're
got
brilliant, aren't they?
super sharp little claws, and they're really not. They really don't seem to be fussed by much. Like, we can just reach in and grab it whenever we need to, and he's very low maintenance. He's awesome.
Yeah. That's it. They're just as easy to keep as a blue tongue, but they kind of do a little bit more cool shit, if you like.
I
You
concur,
know,
my
and
friend.
I, I reckon the other analogy that I'd like to put on them is they're the Australian monkey tail skink. You know,
Yeah,
those Solomon Island skinks. I know they're a bit bigger, but some of the really big pink tongues get pretty close to that. You know,
yeah.
and I think that there's definitely a niche that out there for those guys that could grow into something more than a niche. You know.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah.
love to see them proliferate within the hobby, and I've got a bit of a thing where I think all reptiles should be $500, and I'd love to see, you know, I mean, at least the bottom, the cheaper reptiles should be at least $500. I'd love to see pink tongues become a $500 animal rather than the 80 or $90 you see them now.
And that therein lies. People would say, well, why is that a problem? But the thing is, unless they have some value attached to them, unfortunately, it does tend to keep the interest low. And once you could get some value in pink tongues, i.e., the same with the blues, if they could go on a similar journey with some cooler variations that drive people's interest, then you know the bush guy gets left in the bush, and the some of the fancy colours get used in the hobby, and then the value and price goes up, and then they're sort of an animal that everybody wants to keep.
Absolutely.
You know.
I'm stoked you're working with them, mate. That's awesome. More people need to know about them, and more people need to keep pink tongue skinks.
They're kind of journeys I love embarking on too. It's that either a first off mutation, a challenge of getting that going and getting it out there, or indeed a species, because you know that with the bluey, whilst I didn't intend that at the start, that's kind of how it played out for me in
Yeah.
regard to sort of being one of the key people to turn that from a boring lizard into something that everybody wants to keep. And I see so many parallels with that pink tongue, and I think yeah, let's do it basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, maybe there'll be a listener out here that'll get into pink tongues after this.
Yeah. There's already a few people that have hit me up since I've been posting pictures of them. Oh, have you got any pink tongues for sale? And it's like, yeah, not yet because it's early doors. Let's see what we can do with them. The few that
Yeah,
I've got to do a little bit with it. I've got a few ideas, so we'll see what happens.
awesome.
Yeah.
You got anything else there to show us?
That's all the lizards I've got on hand,
Yeah,
really.
good.
So
Nah, nah,
we've
covered
we've
that.
done a little. We've done a tour through the bluey mutations, looked at some gravid mutations, looked at some gravid mums, and we've looked at some skinks. Um, yeah, so I guess the other thing I wanted to touch on, um, sort of which I've been able to do recently, which has sort of meant that I dipped back on some of my monitor species and so on, was get involved in writing some book material, and that's something that's always interested me, is to actually get some of this stuff written down and see it on the shelf, you know. And I was fortunate enough recently to put an entry in one of Danny Brown's books. You know, we've all seen these awesome books that Danny Brown puts out there. You know, you got the Monitor one there. You know, he did his first editions some years ago, and I was lucky enough to do a full mutation sort of section in his skink book, which has enabled me to put all of the photos that I've that I've taken over the years of all those skink mutations that we've just looked at. So whether it's all those those albino Cunninghams and tree skinks, all through to all the combinations and single gene mutations in the blue tongues, and then get photos from keepers that have got things like melanistic she oak skinks and sort of albino hosmers and all the sort of stuff that's popped up over the years, and get all that centralized in one place. And it was sort of a bit of an honor to be able to do that for Danny in that book. So yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
that's that side of it. And then on top of that, in the background, I've been working on another book which I gave you an image of, which I'm sure that you'll share on the screen there.
Yeah, absolutely.
For people to see, which is a book that has just gone to print, that will be sort of available in about 3 months' time, which is
Amazing.
a 400 page, 800 photo hardback blue tongue book, which covers sort of everything, if you like, blue tongues, which is, you'll have a full veterinary section in it provided by Josh Linus, a natural history section done by John McGrath. And then there's a shingleback section done by Tristan Pace, so it's got everything from husbandry right the way through to basic care, veterinary needs, breeding do's and don'ts, natural history. It's got sort of a whistle stop tour of the Australian hobby and how to market your reptiles on the internet and all that kind of stuff in there. So it's a modern keeping guide, so sort of an Instagram and Facebook journey. Then a sort of a bluey paint job section which covers the whole mutation game as well. So it's taken a few years, but there's that coming soon.
Fascinating. I'm
Right.
I'm excited to hear, and I'll have to get my hands on a copy so I can read about the social media side of things because that's something that fascinates me. It's a really cool little section to add into a book because obviously the industry that we're in now is so much more than keeping a few lizards at home. If you want to make something of it, you really have to include social media within what you do.
Yeah, and that's something for me that I've fortunately been on board with since the onset of social media, in that sense, if you like. Um, Again, late noughties, 2010 is when sort of Facebook came live, and I was one of the first people to be putting pictures of reptiles up online, and and we've all seen how that's grown, and
Yeah,
how that drives
absolutely.
the hobby. And I've been fortunate enough to grow an Instagram and Facebook account uh, um, through those years when everything was viewed positively and everybody was liking and sharing on stuff, and everybody was like, wow, I didn't know you could get this and that and the other. And it's sort of um, been a bit of a journey. I know some of that's plateaued a little bit these days because everybody's inundated with social media, but the reptile scene is well and truly entrenched on those platforms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, some of that's covered in that book. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe I can get some tips on how to grow this damn podcast page. I'll have to
I,
get some fancy blue tongues.
oh, look, and mate, that's kind of what I was touching on there. It's plateaued a bit now. It's very difficult to grow media these days.
Yes.
Back in the day, everybody liked and shared. Um,
Yeah.
People these days are trying to filter out social media from their life somewhat, and it's hard to get a platform and grow it.
Yeah.
Because and also there's already a lot of existing platforms that have taken that
Well,
space. So
there's just so many. So to really stand out on one platform is challenging because if like I'm an Instagram guy, I don't really like too many of the other ones. But on top of Instagram, obviously there's Facebook and then there's Threads and then there's Twitter or X or whatever it is and there's just TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but there's just so many different forms of social media. So for to be, to do really well in one of them, you got to really stand out, I think.
Yeah, and exactly that. And you've got to be consistent, and you've got to be putting out there constantly, and have new material. I mean, in some ways it's easy for me to say because, like I say, I was at the start of that journey and managed to be in the right place at the right time. But on
Yeah.
top of that, I've always consistently taken good photos, and stayed on the one topic, and that's another thing. You know, I've seen a lot of people in the reptile game come and go, give up on things, but on that
Yeah.
whole blue tongue journey, um, it's literally just been consistent the whole
Yeah,
way.
you've stayed
So
true. Well, the one shining light in this is that the podcast is a passion project. I'm not looking to make any money from this. I would be stoked if it eventuated one day, but I'm just happy to talk to people about reptiles.
yeah, yeah, for sure, and doing a good job of it too, because I noticed it, and I sort of had
Thanks,
seen what
mate.
you were doing. I'd seen you'd been interviewing all these people, and I was like, I want to go at that. I haven't been on a podcast for a while, and
Yeah,
I saw that you were interviewing all the too cool for school Cairns boys, um,
yeah.
uh, recently, and thought, yeah, I'm not too old to join that crew. I want to
Well,
go as
well,
well.
I
Yeah,
know where all those blokes live, so if they had said no to me, they could
yeah.
have gone south.
I'd seen all you guys up in Cairns, which I'd also noticed that there was sort of um, 4 or 5 different keepers up in Cairns that were sort of driving the hobby, if you like. Um, that seems to have changed. Back in the day, there was a load of movers and shakers in New South Wales and Queensland. But I've noticed over the last few years, you'd got the likes of sort of Aaron Hopper with his grasses greener reptiles, bringing a sort of a really refreshing um, angle on keeping tropical species, you know, with your emerald tree monitors and green tree pythons, um, and doing it really, really well. Um,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, you've got yourself doing green tree pythons. You've got Ati Godoli continuing with the blueies up there, um, sort of following on with some of my work. You've got Julius picking up from where his father left off, which we can touch on in a minute. Um, he done a great job. I wondered, uh, how much Julius would get into reptiles um, after that, but he's doing a great job with his green tree pythons and parentes, and I've sort of bought a couple of parentes off him recently, and so on. And then you've got Matt Somerville. Can't miss out Matt, who's been into reptiles for years, but he's sort of up there doing the do with parentes and green pythons as well, and so on. Um,
Yeah.
there was there was Rob Grabowski, who's actually moved back down to New South Wales, but doing his monsoon monitors up there as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
did I
there's
miss did
definitely
I miss anyone? Yeah,
probably, but you won't offend
yeah,
them. But there definitely
yeah,
seems to be a little epicenter of people up here, and it's pretty awesome. There's definitely a bit of community as well. Like I know most of those guys would be happy to lend a hand if I reached out and needed to. And yeah, like you said, Julius has taken his father Peter's collection on after Peter's passing, and yeah, as you said, he's doing a phenomenal job. I think he counted a couple of years ago. The numbers come down a bit, but there was over like 150 adult animals that Julius um, took on board, and quite a few of them still live up outdoors, up at the ranch up there in near Mariba, and the parentes are still cruising around in their bloody 30-meter across pits or whatever they are, and
yeah,
yeah, it's epic. It's great. Yeah, and obviously Jules
yeah.
is actually Jules said he got bombarded with messages after you posted the parenti. A lot of people wanting hand tamed parentes, which he says he does not offer.
Yeah, oh, they were just pretty tame. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I was impressed with it. I maybe threw him under the bus by using those words.
a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, yeah,
That's all
yeah.
right. I think he managed to get rid of a few more, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, he's done a great job. I was one of Peter's. I like to think Peter was one of my true friends. We shared a lot of information on large monitors over the years, and I was fortunate enough to even bail him out when he had a couple of flat years with one of my animals to get him going again, which um, sort of um, sort of is I was very excited about doing, And
Yeah.
Peter was the monitor god, and I was able to help him in the same way he'd helped me when I first started. So yeah, there's a bit of sentiment on that, and to see Julius get those keep that rolling is pretty cool, I reckon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd like to tell a story about the first and unfortunately the only time I met Peter. It was we were up at his place up in the Tablelands. It was I remember it was very early. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning, and we were picking up a very large lace monitor. He actually sold the big alpha
yeah,
male bells to us many years ago, and I was
yeah,
watching Peter catch this thing, and he had a rope on the end of a pole that he was using as the noose rope. And Peter was
yeah,
just he was just ever so carefully, he'd get it over the head, and then he would just pull back a little bit, and he'd get it over and just pull back. And I'm standing there, I'm like, what is? Come on, buddy, pull it, pull the rope, you can do it. But I wasn't about to tell Peter Krause how to catch a goanna. And then
yeah,
I
yeah,
I swear to you, I blinked, and Julius was holding this like 12-kilo lizard, going, "Hey, bro, have you got that bag ready?" And I went, oh shit, okay,
yeah,
all
yeah,
right, we'll get the goanna in the bag. And to this day, I think is still the most impressive reptile capture that I've ever seen. And
yeah,
I get to watch Jules catch lizards most days. He does
yeah.
not it does not falter, that man.
Yeah, yeah, that's how you've got to be with those things. Hey, yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yeah, you
I,
can't
I,
miss him.
I'm very similar. I have a farming background. I grew up on a farm. We used to have to round cattle up, and you'd have to be on the right side of cattle, and you just that kind of stuff. You're born with it a little bit, or you learn it as you're around animals. And he who falters fails. And
Yeah, absolutely.
you've got to be in the right position, and you've got to take your opportunity. Um,
Yeah.
my answer to catching goannas is do it at about 4 a.m. in the morning when they're asleep.
Yeah, that works. Take
That
all the
works.
hollows out so they can't hide, or take the whole hollow. If the lizard's in the
Yeah,
hollow,
yeah,
take the
yeah.
whole
But
thing.
but but yeah, that's how I used to catch my piranha. Go and catch them. Go catch them when they're cold at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
set the alarm and up you get.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's it. 100%. Yeah.
yeah, you mentioned back earlier at the very early on at the start of this podcast about you kept blueies in pits at some of the first reptiles you kept, and you continued that. You still keep a fair few animals outside.
Oh, look, I do. Yeah, I mean, I'm in Southeast Queensland. I'm not in quite the spot that you're in for outdoor keeping, but look, reptiles of all sorts can be kept quite successfully where I am, and over the years, I've kept large goannas down to small goannas, all different species of skinks, blueies too, in a variety of different large and small outdoor cages. And I've designed quite a few different sort of variations along the way to enable that. Um, yeah, from little sort of rabbit hutch style things for skinks with sort of shade sails over them through to sort of large um, 6 by 6 meter cages for larger monitors. And I've also got these days, because I'm into keeping birds as well, I've got sort of 20-30 meter square flight aviaries that have
Wow.
got sort of a mixture of things in there from I've got one that's got a water feature in there with turtles and fish, and then there's galahs sort of flying around in there, and then there's skinks also sort of in some rock piles in there as well. So kind of got a little bit carried away with that whole outdoor cage thing, and coming up with different solutions and different ideas to do this, that, and the other. So yeah,
Yeah, I
um,
think the outdoor keeping, you certainly have to have a particular level of sort of pragmatism to you to be able to set them up appropriately. To be able, you've got to deal with some adverse conditions at times. And I know Cairns is obviously pretty good for it, but if you put an enclosure in the sun up here, you will cook an animal. So you have to really think about a bunch of different attributes to outdoor keeping before building things.
the
And you've got to have the skill to navigate these challenges. to set it up right.
Yeah, for sure. Firstly, you've got to know how to build stuff, or be prepared to build stuff. It gets pretty expensive if you're going to get somebody else to do it or for you. And
Yep.
secondly, I think the 2 points that I would say to underpin what you've just said is that you're only as good as your worst day, and that's either a really really hot day, or sun deluge or rain deluge. And you can keep animals successfully for a number of years, but if you lose them on a really hot day, then that defines the entire journey, and you need to build those enclosures with the
Yeah,
idea that at
with
some
those
point,
days in mind, yeah.
with those days in mind, you're either going to have to go and catch them and put them somewhere else on those days, or um, you've got to provide for it.
Yeah.
And with large goannas and things like that, you want to be providing for it, because you ain't going to be wanting to catch big perennies and house them on hot days. And
On a hot day.
uh, yeah, it's kind of gets a bit difficult. And that
Yeah.
goes the same with birds, and anything down to small lizards, large birds, all that stuff. And the other phrase that I like to use on outdoor cages is, "There's no set and forget."
Yeah.
People sometimes think, "Oh, I can set up an outdoor cage and yeah, well, we can just leave it and forget about it. It should be good." No, no, no. There's no
No.
set and forget. There is no set and forget when it comes to the Australian weather and its extremes. So,
No, that's right. I mean, even I unfortunately have moved house a bunch of times, but in the last few years, and keeping things outdoors at the same time. And so every time I move to a new place, I've got to go, okay, this is good. This is where the sun is right now at this particular time of year. But fast forward 6 months, the sun's going to be over there. That tree's not going to be, blocking the sun anymore.
yeah,
I have to mitigate for that, or
yeah,
just as an example. But there's a bunch of different things that, yeah, really really need
yeah.
consideration.
Not only from dusk till dawn does the sun move, but obviously in summer it sits higher in the sky. And there is no reptile on this planet that basks in the middle of the day on an Australian hot day.
Yeah, and
So
certainly not for hours on end.
no, they're 99.9% of the time, by that stage they've seek refuge, and you need to have provided that with insulated material that will at least enable ambient temperature.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's your
absolutely.
challenge. Yeah,
Jeez,
yeah,
that was a bit of a rant from both of us there. I like it.
yeah, yeah,
You gotta
for
let them
sure.
know. Yeah.
Oh, look,
Um.
I do mind admitting it, but I don't mind admitting it. I've lost animals at different times under different situations, and
Oh, of course. Yeah, we
there
all have.
there
Yeah.
is there is there is nothing that breaks your heart more than that. And as a result, there's nothing that sharpens your keeping skills more than that too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, I don't have too much more to go over. I don't think. Joe, you got anything else you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good whistle stop tour of sort of my involvement in the Australian reptile hobby. And it's, yeah, I've enjoyed the last hour or so in which we put that together. I hope everybody that's listening and watching's got a little bit out of it. Um, I will use this chance to say that I've got something similar, but obviously it won't be 17 episodes of it like yourself, and you're looking to go around everybody in the hobby. I've got sort of a similar, probably a 4 or 5 part um, um, podcast stroke live thing that I'm going to be doing soon once the bluey babies are on the ground, and it's going to be called uh, Joe's Bluey Lab. And I'm hoping to be able to do that with copies of my book in hand as well, so that we can sort of look at different parts of the book and look at all the different baby blue tongues and different color combinations that come out, and sort of how you go about creating those, and some of the thought processes in behind the slight variances and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's to come from me. Um,
Awesome.
but yeah, thank you.
No, thanks very much for
Mm.
coming on. And Well, I would like to ask just a fun question to round things off is if you could keep any reptile from anywhere in the world, what would it be and why?
Um, it's the blue tongue.
It's the blue
It's the
tongue.
blue it's the blue the Australian skink species to me um just represent a truly diverse genus of animals, and um I think if I was to pick one out of them, whilst I did just say the blue tongue, I'd have to go one further that and say the land mullet, because it encompasses everything that a bluey encompasses, but it's bigger, it's larger. Um, you can set it up in a colony. Um, it's sort of it encapsulates everything that I love about reptiles. You know, when you go out on a sort of a sunny autumn morning, and sorry, a spring morning, or one of those sort of cooler but still sunny mornings, and you see three or four land mullets basking on a log, or after they've dropped babies, some babies sort of there. They to me are everything that's magnificent about Australian lizards. Um,
Awesome. Land mullets,
yeah,
the pinnacle.
well, they are
Have
to
you got
me.
any?
So, yeah, I do. Yeah, I
Yeah,
do.
good.
I've kept land mullets for probably 15, 16 years,
Yeah,
I have had a couple of years here and there where I haven't had any. Um, I used to keep a couple, just a pair, and breed them. And then I lost one of the pair and passed the other one on to somebody else. So I didn't have them for a few years, but I've now got sort of a colony of half a dozen again. So, yeah,
awesome.
they're my sort of guilty favourite. Not worth much, and
No, but they're
not.
awesome.
I just love them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good. All right, Joe. Thanks very much. Hey, if anyone's looking for you and they want to see what you're up to, where can they find you?
Um, Social media, we've got Instagram, Joe Ball Blue Tongues. Facebook is also called Joe Ball Blue Tongues, and I've got some YouTube videos which I've got a bit of age about them now, which have been up there for some time, and that's on Blue Tongue TV. So there's those three platforms where you find me, and I've also got a website which again is called Joe Ball Blue Tongues. That's joeballbluetongues.com, and that's got sort of a breakdown of all the different bluey mutations that I've been fortunate enough to produce over the years, and all my other skink projects as well. So yeah, check those out.
Yeah, awesome. I'll put all
Mm.
those links in the show notes for sure. As always, everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at joemac.uthl. If you've enjoyed the content, you had a good time listening, please consider liking, subscribing, and following along. That wraps up episode number 17. Thanks very much, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. So from Joe and Joe, thank you.
Cheers. Remember to check out habitatsathome.com.au or Habitats at Home on Instagram or Facebook for all your PVC reptile enclosures and reptile supplies.